They called my dish amateur garbage in front of Charleston's elite. I set down my wine glass, smiled, and left the gala. 6 months later, they stood in line outside my restaurant and couldn't step inside. The trespass notice with their names on it hung in my office, right next to the James Beard semi-finalist certificate. You want to know what I did with their mockery? I turned it into a Michelin-recommended tasting menu they'll never taste. This is how I built an empire from their insults, one perfectly seared grudge at a time. My name is Ava Carlyle, and I learned that night how a chandelier can witness a murder, the kind where you're still breathing, but your dignity bleeds out onto Carrara marble. The Halcyon Club stretched before me like a fever dream at 9:15 p.m. All gilded mirrors and whispered fortunes. Charleston's elite circled their prey in Armani and Chanel, champagne flutes catching light like tiny daggers. I stood at the VIP table, watching my mother Elaine adjust the microphone with her manicured fingers, the same fingers that once taught me to fold napkins into swans, before she decided I was better suited as free labor than family. "Ladies and gentlemen," she purred into the mic, her voice honeyed poison that made 200 heads turn. "Before we begin the auction, I simply must share something amusing." The crowd leaned in, hungry for gossip dressed as charity. "My daughter here," she gestured at me like I was Exhibit A. "She cooks. Well, she tries to. Bless her heart." The southern knife twist. Bless your heart, the velvet glove over the brass knuckles. Richard, my father, stepped forward with his scotch, ice cubes rattling like bones. "Remember that risotto disaster when she was 16? We had to rescue an entire wedding reception. Thank God for Carlisle Events emergency protocols." He winked at Judge Morrison's wife. "We've been fixing her little experiments ever since." The laughter rippled outward, polite and sharp-edged. I felt it in my teeth, tasted copper in my mouth. Senator Blake's daughter whispered something behind her hand. The Beaumont twins, who'd eaten my food at a dozen family gatherings, suddenly found their shoes fascinating. "Speaking of which," Elaine continued, her emerald earrings swaying like pendulums, "we're donating a full wedding catering tonight, professionally done. Of course, not Ava's. Hobby food. Hobby food." The words hung in the air like burnt garlic. I set down my untouched glass of Chablis with the kind of precision I used to julienne carrots controlled. Exact, lethal if necessary. The crystal made a small, clear note against the marble table. Such a tiny sound, but in that moment, it felt like a judge's gavel. "Excuse me," I said to no one, to everyone, to the glittering void of people who'd known me since birth and chose this moment to see nothing. I walked through that ballroom like swimming through aspic slow, suffocating, everything suspended in artificial preservation. The kitchen doors beckoned at the far end, stainless steel portals to a world that made sense. I pushed through them, and the assault began immediately, the percussion of knives on boards, the hiss of sauté pans, the ballet of line cooks who moved like they were born to it, the executive chef, a man I'd never met but whose food I'd been tasting all evening, looked up from plating. "You lost." "Ma'am." "No," I said, breathing in the smoke and butter and truth of that space. "Just found." I walked past the guard manger station where a young cook was placing microgreens with tweezers, the kind of careful attention my parents never believed I possessed, past the grill where ribeyes seared and sparked, sending up clouds that smelled like redemption, past the pastry section where someone had written "behind" in chocolate on parchment paper, a kitchen joke that would never land at a Halcyon Club table, at the back door, where the dumpsters and delivery trucks lived their unglamorous lives. I stopped. Through the service window, I could see my parents holding court, their hands gesturing as they continued their performance. The woman who'd driven me to farmers markets at 5 a.m., the man who'd eaten every practice dish without complaint until there was an audience to impress. The night air hit my face, thick with jasmine and possibility. Somewhere, A mockingbird was singing stolen songs appropriate, considering what had just been taken from me in that ballroom. But mockingbirds do something else. Something my parents never understood about their daughter who played with food. They take what others discard and make it their own. They sing louder, clearer, with more variation than the original ever could. I pulled out my phone, fingers steady now, and typed a single note. No more free labor. No more family discounts. No more silence. The kitchen door swung shut behind me as I walked into the Charleston night, leaving behind the chandelier witnesses and marble floors. I didn't know it then, but I'd just set the timer on the longest, slowest, most perfectly executed dish of my life. Revenge, served at exactly the right temperature. The cast iron skillet still sits in my apartment, seasoned with 12 years of stolen dreams. I was 12 when I first lifted it, arms shaking under the weight, determined to make Sunday dinner while my parents planned another wedding for strangers. Riverton, South Carolina, population 8,000. Aspirations infinite, opportunities zero unless you manufactured them yourself. Our house sprawled across Magnolia Drive like a statement the Carlisle family had made it. What the neighbors didn't see was the child in the kitchen at 5:30, a mum, practicing knife cuts on potatoes because real ingredients cost money and mistakes weren't allowed. Ava, sweetheart, Elaine would say, perfume already perfect at dawn. The Weatherby wedding needs 200 canapes. You'll help, won't you? It's good practice. Practice for what I wanted to ask, but never did. Instead, I piped cream cheese onto endive leaves until my hands cramped, arranged prosciutto roses until I saw them behind my eyelids, whisked hollandaise until my shoulder burned like Judgment Day. The first time they stole from me, I was 14. The Blackwell anniversary 50 couples, garden party, my grandmother's chess pie recipe I'd spent 6 months perfecting. I watched from the kitchen window as Elaine presented it to the photographer. Old Carlisle family secret, she told the society reporter, been in our family for generations. The recipe was from my other grandmother, Dad's mother, who died before teaching anyone else her techniques. I'd found her journal in the attic, water-stained and precious, decoded her abbreviated measurements through trial and error. But that didn't fit the Carlisle events narrative. By 16, I was ghost running their entire prep kitchen. The official story, Elaine and Richard were culinary artists. The reality, their daughter, invisible in hairnet and latex gloves, making magic at 2 a.m. while they slept off networking wine. You should be grateful, Richard said once, finding me asleep over a cutting board at midnight, 3 wedding cakes due by morning. Other kids work fast food. You're learning the family business. But it wasn't my business. My name appeared nowhere on contracts, websites, or paychecks. When I turned 18 and asked about culinary school, Elaine laughed like I'd suggested joining the circus. Why waste money on a degree you already cook? Adequately. Besides, the business needs you here. Adequately. She said it while serving my black truffle mac and cheese to the mayor's wife, accepting compliments like she'd birthed each bechamel bubble herself. I started keeping evidence without knowing why. Photos of every dish, time-stamped, recipe notebooks in my handwriting, dated and witnessed by the one server who knew the truth, Marcus, who quit the day after my 19th birthday, disgusted by what he called culinary slavery. Document everything, kid, he'd said, loading his knives into a duffel bag. Someday you'll need proof that you exist. The leather journal became my confession booth. Every stolen recipe, every unpaid hour, every time they presented my innovation as their tradition. The Carlisle seasoning blend that food bloggers requested mine. Created at 17 while recovering from appendicitis, high on pain meds and determination. The Low Country Fusion menu that won them a state award developed during my 20th summer, testing flavor profiles on my tongue until I couldn't taste anything but ambition. When I suggested a salary at 21, Elaine's face went from surprise to disappointment to manipulation in 3 seconds flat. Family doesn't charge family. Ava, everything we have will be yours someday. Why be greedy now? But I saw the books once. left open on Richard's desk. Carlisle events cleared $500,000 that year. My contribution unacknowledged. Unpaid was worth at least 40% of their revenue. I was a ghost chef haunting my own life. The breaking point came slowly, then all at once. 25 years old, watching them on local morning television, demonstrating their technique for herb-crusted lamb. My technique. Developed after 60 attempts, perfecting the ratio of rosemary to thyme. Discovering that a whisper of coffee in the crust created depth nobody could identify but everyone remembered. "We're so blessed," Elaine told the host, "to have built this from nothing. Just the two of us and our passion. Just the two of them. I didn't exist, had never existed, was just a kitchen poltergeist who happened to share their DNA." That night, I opened my own bank account, started saving every tip from the private cooking lessons I gave in secret, photographed every page of my journals, recorded Richard at the next family gathering, drunk and laughing. Ava does all the cooking, but we do all the eating and earning. The leather journal grew thick with evidence. Not revenge, not yet just proof that I was more than their shadow, more than their secret ingredient. Every timestamp a tiny rebellion. Every photo a declaration I exist, I create, I matter. They never noticed the revolution happening in their own kitchen, too busy taking bows for performances they'd never rehearsed. But I was learning something they never taught in their family business: how to document the crime while still at the scene. The notification hit my phone at 6:43 a.m., 3 days after the Halcyon Club disaster. I was elbow deep in flour, rage-baking croissants in my studio apartment when the buzzing started and wouldn't stop. Holy shit, Ava, you're viral. My friend Tessa's text came with a link. I clicked it with flour-dusted fingers, leaving white fingerprints on the screen like evidence at a crime scene. The video had 87,000 views and climbing. Someone, God bless their steady hand and strategic positioning, had captured the entire humiliation in high definition. "Luxury Mom Destroys Daughter's Dreams at Charity Gala," screamed the title. The comments section was a beautiful massacre. "This is financial abuse with a side of gaslighting. The daughter's face when she sets down that wine glass, that's the moment a villain is born. Someone find this girl and give her a restaurant." That last comment had 1,200 likes and a reply that stopped my heart. I can do better than that. Ava Carlisle, check your DMs. Marco Levant. Marco Levant. The name hit like cold water on a burn. Chef owner of Smoke and Salt, the roaming pop-up that had food critics writing poetry and regular people camping overnight for reservations. He'd turned down 3 permanent locations, preferring what he called culinary guerrilla warfare. His message was brief. Saw the video. Saw your parents' menus from the last 5 years. Did some digging. The math doesn't add up. They don't have the skill for those dishes. You do. Want to prove it? I have a slot next Friday. 40 covers. Your menu, your name, my platform. Yes or no? I wrote back with shaking hands. Yes. But I needed in writing my name on everything. Already drafted the contract. And Ava, that risotto story your father told, I know the Weatherby family. They said the replacement meal was garbage compared to the original. I'm betting you made the first one. I had 16 years old, truffle risotto for $200, perfect until Richard decided to improve it with pre-grated Parmesan from a can. They'd blamed me for the disaster, served his version, and collected complaints like communion wafers. The next 7 days blurred into preparation fever. I incorporated Ember and Grace Hospitality LLC using an online service at 2 a.m. My laptop screen the only light in my apartment. The name came from my grandmother's Ember, my mother's mother who'd taught me to read Smoke, and Grace, my father's mother whose journal started everything. My checking account held $3,000 years of secret teaching fees and hidden tips. I spent every penny on ingredients, choosing them like weapons. Dove Creek lamb, heirloom tomatoes from a farm my parents had deemed too small scale, butter from a dairy they'd rejected for not offering bulk discounts. The pop-up location made me laugh out loud an abandoned church in North Charleston, complete with confession booth converted to a wine bar. Appropriate, Marco said when he handed me the keys. You're about to make a lot of people confess their food sins. I posted one photo on the Instagram account I'd created that morning, my hands over mise en place. Everything arranged like an altar. The caption, Ember and Grace presents No Longer Silent. 7 courses, 40 seats, this Friday. Reservations open now? They sold out in 4 minutes. Charleston Food and Wine magazine called within an hour. Is this connected to the video? The reporter asked. Are you Richard and Elaine Carlisle's daughter? I'm Ava Carlisle, I said, tasting freedom on my tongue. Owner and executive chef of Ember and Grace. That's all that matters. But of course it wasn't. My phone exploded with notifications. Food bloggers dissecting frame-by-frame screenshots of dishes from Carlisle Events' website, comparing them to my style, my plating, my signatures hidden in plain sight. Someone found Marcus, my old ally, and he went on record. I watched that girl build an empire they took credit for. About time she took it back. Elaine called 17 times. Richard sent texts progressing from confused to angry to threatening. I blocked them both, but not before screenshotting his message. You ungrateful brat. We made you. Without us, you're nothing. We'll see about that, I thought, testing the edge on my knife. Sharp enough to cut through family ties. The universe, apparently, was taking sides. A James Beard Award winner shared my reservation link. The Charleston City paper ran a piece titled, The Chef Who Came In From the Cold. Stut, 3 more pop-up venues reached out, offering spaces from abandoned warehouses to rooftop gardens. Marco stopped by while I was prepping, watched me work for 10 minutes in silence. You know they're going to come for you, he said finally. Parents like that don't just let go. Let them come, I replied, torching sugar over a creme brulee until it looked like armor. I've been preparing for this my whole life. I just didn't know it. He smiled, the kind of smile sharks might share over fresh prey. The food world loves a comeback story. Even better when it's a revenge story dressed in brown butter and sage. That night, I sat in my empty apartment, surrounded by prep lists and recipes, the LED lights making everything look like a crime scene photo. Tomorrow, I'd cook under my own name for the first time. No more ghost chef, no more shadow daughter, no more silence. My phone buzzed one more time. An unknown number, but I recognized the message's tone immediately. Elaine, using someone else's phone. This is temporary. Ava, you'll fail and come crawling back. Family is forever. I deleted it and went back to my prep list. Family might be forever, but so are knives, and I'd just learned how to use mine. The war room was a coffee shop table covered in legal pads, laptop screens, and the architectural bones of revenge. 6 weeks had passed since the church pop-up 6 sold-out events, 1,100 perfect plates, and 0 contact with the people who shared my DNA but not my vision. You need to trademark before they do. My lawyer, Naomi Chen Williams, said, sliding documents across reclaimed wood. I'd found her through Marco, an intellectual property specialist who'd left corporate law to protect artists from vultures. Your parents filed for Carlisle Culinary Traditions yesterday. They're building a fence around what they think is theirs. Let them, I said, signing my name with the same precision I used to Brunoise shallots. Ember and Grace Hospitality. Trademark the name, the logo, and these 14 dish names. Not the recipes, just the names. I want them to see their daughter's creativity protected by law every time they steal. The business model came to me at 312 AIM, somewhere between the 4th espresso and the 15th revision. Private dining club, members only, curated guest lists, the kind of exclusivity Charleston money understood, but with a twist behavior standards written into the membership agreement. Clause 7, I told Naomi, watching her type. Members and guests who demonstrate disrespect toward staff, including but not limited to verbal abuse, condescension, or hostile behavior, will have their membership immediately revoked without refund. She looked up, understanding dawning. You're building a place they can't enter even if they want to. I'm building a place where respect isn't optional, I corrected. But we both knew the truth. Every rule was a brick in the wall between my future and their reach. The pop-ups became my laboratory. A container kitchen in West Ashley where I served 40 guests in what used to be a shipping yard. The back garden of a novelist's house, where Spanish moss became ceiling and candlelight made everyone look like conspirators. A brewery after hours, where beer pairings turned my grandmother's recipes into religious experiences. Each event sold out faster. 4 minutes became 30 seconds. The mailing list grew 500, 1,500, 5,200 subscribers who'd eaten my food and wanted more. I collected their reviews like evidence, video testimonials from people who'd never met my parents, but somehow tasted the truth in every bite. "This food has a story," one woman said into my phone camera, unauthorized tears smudging her mascara. "You can taste the history, the struggle, the triumph. It's autobiography you can eat." Between services, I documented everything. Recipe development videos at 4 a.m., time-stamped and uploaded to private cloud storage. Email threads with suppliers showing my ordering history, my relationships, my reputation separate from Carlisle events. Every Instagram post geotagged and dated, building a digital fortress of proof. The podcast circuit embraced me like a prodigal child. She Cooks Charleston had me on for an hour, dissecting the video, the pop-ups, the psychology of culinary theft. I named no names, threw no stones, just cooked live on air and let the hosts draw their own conclusions when they tasted food that matched Carlisle Events' signature style. "Your parents must be proud," the host said. "Fishing." "I'm proud," I replied, and left it at that. Marcus called from Seattle, where he'd become sous chef at a Michelin-starred restaurant. "They're panicking," he said. "Called me yesterday, offering triple my old salary to come back. Said they need someone with my institutional knowledge." "They need someone with my hands," I translated. "Exactly. I told them I don't work for thieves anymore. Thought you should know they're bleeding clients. The Fairmont wedding next month just pulled out." The Fairmont wedding, $300,000 contract, society event of the season. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not guilt, just the clean emptiness of a plate waiting for the next course. Rowan Pierce appeared at my 5th pop-up like money incarnate tailored everywhere, calculating eyes, the kind of person who turned appetite into empire. She owned 17% of Charleston's restaurant real estate through her hospitality investment fund. "I've been watching," she said, sampling my deconstructed shrimp and grits like a scientist with a new specimen. 6 events, 0 negative reviews, and a waiting list that could fill a stadium. "You're ready for brick and mortar." "I have $3,000 and a Honda Civic," I told her. "You have 5,200 email addresses and the most talked about food story in the Southeast. I have capital and a building that needs a soul." She pulled out an iPad, showed me photos of a 19th century building in the French Quarter. Exposed brick, original tin ceilings, a kitchen that needed everything but had the bones of greatness. 10-year lease, my fund covers build-out. You maintain creative control. But I want something specific, a membership model. Exclusivity breeds desire. "Already planned," I said, and showed her my notebook. Application process, referral system, behavior standards, the right to refuse service written into the foundation like rebar. She smiled for the first time, and I understood why her competitors called her the shark. "You're not building a restaurant. You're building a fortress where you control the guest list." I respect that. I also suspect who won't be on it. We shook hands at 11:47 p.m., surrounded by empty plates and full possibility. 6 weeks from humiliation to hear my own place, my own rules, my own name on the door. That night, I drew the layout on napkins, sketching where every burner would stand, every plate would rest, every excluded person would never sit. The French Quarter building would become Ember and Grace, and its membership list would read like a love letter to everyone except the 2 people who'd given me life and tried to steal it back, spoonful by spoonful. The cease and desist letter arrived on Carlisle Events letterhead, hand-delivered by a process server who looked apologetic. 8 weeks into my new life, 3 weeks into construction, and my parents had finally played their first real card. Defendant Ava Carlisle has misappropriated trade secrets and proprietary recipes belonging to Carlisle Events LLC. I read aloud to Naomi, who'd driven over at 7 a.m. When I called, defendant must immediately cease using any and all culinary techniques, recipes, or methodologies developed under the Carlisle Events umbrella. Naomi took the letter, scanning it like a surgeon examining a tumor. They're claiming ownership of your grandmother's recipes. They're claiming ownership of me, I corrected, pulling out my evidence binders, 3 years of documentation I'd never known I'd need. But I've got receipts. Literally. We spread the papers across my apartment floor like we were mapping an invasion. Handwritten recipes dated and photographed. Emails from 2018 where Richard explicitly stated, Ava created this dish. Bank statements showing zero payment for thousands of hours, testimonials from former employees, and the crown jewel a video from my cousin's wedding where Elaine, wine-drunk and careless, laughed into the camera. People think I cook. Can you imagine I haven't touched a stove since Ava turned 12? This is gold, Naomi said. But they're not really after legal victory. They're after intimidation. She was right. Within hours, Elaine had posted in 6 Charleston Facebook groups, each message calibrated for maximum damage. Heartbroken to announce that our daughter has stolen from our family business. We trained her, loved her, gave her everything, and she's repaid us with theft and betrayal. The comments split like a broken plate. Half offered sympathy to my parents. The other half linked to the Halcyon video with popcorn emojis. But Elaine wasn't done. She called my suppliers, one by one, with warnings. If you sell to that ungrateful girl, Carlisle Events will never order from you again. 3 vendors called me within an hour, apologetic but firm. Carlisle Events was established money. I was a risk they couldn't afford. Fine, I told my prep cook, Lisa, who'd joined me from the pop-ups. We go guerrilla? I drove to farms too small for Carlisle Events' radar, introduced myself to home gardeners with excess produce, found a brotherhood of small-batch suppliers who understood what it meant to be bulldozed by bigger names. The Ace hardware manager's wife raised chickens her eggs became my gold standard. A retired chemist grew heirloom tomatoes in a greenhouse behind his Victorian. His black crims became my signature garnish. The network grew organically, like sourdough starter, each connection feeding the next. Meanwhile, my parents escalated. They hired a PR firm, launched a website for original Carlisle recipes, filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau against a business that wasn't even open yet. Richard gave an interview to the Charleston Mercury, painting himself as a father betrayed. We gave her everything. This is how she repays us with theft and public humiliation. I didn't respond. Instead, I cooked. Every pop-up became evidence. I live-streamed my prep, showing my hands creating dishes my parents claimed to own. Timestamps became my alibi, witnesses my jury. When they claimed ownership of the Low Country cassoulet, I posted the original journal entry from my grandmother Grace, dated 1962 with my annotations from 2019, showing how I'd modernized it. The food bloggers loved the drama. Charleston's most delicious legal battle, one called it. Another ran a side-by-side comparison of Carlisle Events' menu descriptions and my documented recipes, highlighting discrepancies in technique that suggested my parents couldn't even properly explain dishes they claimed to have created. Naomi built our counter case methodically. Defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We won't file unless they force us, she said, but this packet will make their lawyer sweat. The breaking point came on a Thursday at 2 p.m. Marcus called from Seattle, voice tight. They're calling your staff, offering them double to jump ship, telling them you'll be bankrupt by Christmas. Lisa confirmed it an hour later. Your mom just offered me $60,000 to be their new executive chef. Said you'd be in jail for theft within 6 months. That night, I sat in the gutted space that would become Ember and Grace, surrounded by exposed wires and possibility. Naomi sat beside me, laptop open, final counterstrike ready. "We send this. They'll know you're not backing down," she said. "Full nuclear." The packet was beautiful in its thoroughness. Every documented hour of unpaid labor, valued at market rate. Every recipe with my development notes predating their claims. Screenshots of their website using my plating styles on dishes created after I'd left. The video from Cousin Sarah's wedding. Statements from 7 former employees. And the knockout punch of forensic accountants' analysis showing that Carlisle Events revenue had dropped 43% since I'd stopped cooking for them. "Send it," I said. Then I did something better. I posted a single photo on Instagram, my hands kneading dough. Grandmother Grace's journal open beside me, her handwriting visible. The caption, "Some things can't be stolen, only inherited." Teaching a masterclass next week on the recipes my grandmother gave me. The ones my soul earned. Link in bio. It sold out in 6 minutes. My phone rang at 11:15 p.m. Richard, breathing like he'd run a marathon. "You're destroying your mother." "No," I said. "I'm building something. You're destroying yourselves." I hung up and went back to my prep list. Tomorrow. I had 40 people to feed, and for the first time in my life, every single one of them would know exactly whose hands had made their meal. The fire marshal stood in my half-built kitchen at 9 a.m. Clipboard in hand, face professionally neutral. "Anonymous complaint," he said. "Alleged code violations, improper ventilation, illegally modified gas lines." I knew who'd made the call before he finished talking. The inspection that should have taken an hour stretched to 4, every joint examined, every connection tested. He found nothing because there was nothing to find. Rowan's contractors were the best in Charleston, paranoid about perfection. "You're clear," he said finally, looking almost disappointed. Whoever called was hoping we'd find something. That was Tuesday. Wednesday brought the health department, another anonymous tip about unsanitary conditions. Thursday, it was building permits, a claim that we'd exceeded our scope. Friday, the Liquor License Board received a letter suggesting I had substance abuse issues that made me unfit to serve alcohol. "They're trying to bleed you dry with delays," Rowan said, watching contractors install the Montague range that had cost more than my car. Death by 1,000 bureaucratic cuts. But I'd grown up in a kitchen I knew how to work under pressure, how to multitask when everything was on fire, while city officials investigated false claims. I kept building. The clay bread oven went in like a heart transplant, precisely positioned to be visible from the dining room through glass panels. Every setback became a refinement, every delay a chance to perfect something else. The soft opening was scheduled for December 1st. 3 weeks out. The sabotage escalated from bureaucratic to personal. My fish supplier called at 6 a.m. on a Monday. "Someone broke into my truck last night, only took your order, everything else untouched." Tuesday. The linen service. Our entire shipment of napkins was somehow redirected. Just the ones with your logo. Wednesday got creative. I arrived to find a woman photographing the construction, claiming to be from the newspaper. 20 minutes later, my contractor found her in the basement, taking pictures of exposed pipes and wiring before we'd finished the cosmetic work trying to make the renovation look shoddy for some hit piece that would never name its source, but would certainly find its way to every Charleston society blog. "You need security cameras," Lisa said, after we'd escorted the fake reporter out. "I need more than that," I replied, and called Marcus. He flew in from Seattle that weekend, bringing something better than muscle credibility. "I'll work the soft opening," he announced. "Sous chef, no pay, my name on the menu beside yours. You have a Michelin-starred job, and you have a story that needs weight. My resume gives you armor." He was right. The announcement that Marcus Chin, rising star of Seattle's culinary scene, would guest chef at Ember and Grace's opening shifted the narrative. Food and Wine picked it up. Eater ran a feature. Suddenly, I wasn't just an angry daughter with a grudge, I was a serious chef attracting serious talent. But my parents had one more card to play, and they played it at 7:15 p.m., 2 nights before soft opening. The power died. Not just a breaker trip complete electrical failure. The emergency generator kicked in, bathing everything in harsh backup lighting. My electrician arrived in 20 minutes, went straight to the main panel, and whistled low. Someone who knows what they're doing hit your main feed. Professional job. But here's the thing, they did it from inside the building. Security footage showed a shadow by the service entrance at 2:43 a.m. The figure wore a maintenance uniform, moved with purpose, and knew exactly where the cameras had blind spots. But they'd made one mistake passed under the one hidden camera Rowan had insisted on installing in the wine storage area. The face was obscured, but the watch wasn't. A Cartier Santos, gold with a leather strap. I'd bought it for Richard's 50th birthday with my secret savings, back when I still believed in redemption. "We can't prove it's him," Naomi said when I showed her the footage. "I don't need to prove it," I replied. "I just need to be ready." The generator held for 7 hours while my electrician performed emergency surgery on the main feed. We lost nothing but time and sleep. The next morning, I had a new security system installed, the kind that sent alerts directly to my phone and backed up to 3 different cloud services. "They're desperate," Rowan observed, reviewing the week's incidents. "Desperate people make mistakes." She was right. The next day, Elaine showed up personally. 4:30 p.m., 42 hours before soft opening. She walked in like she owned the place. Chanel suit impeccable, smile sharp enough to julienne carrots. "We need to talk," she said. We don't," I replied, continuing to prep my mise en place. "This has gone far enough. Ava, come home. We'll forget this happened. You can cook for the company, officially this time. Junior partner, your name on the website." Junior partner in my own talent. Her face flickered frustration, maybe fear. "You're going to fail. Restaurant margins are brutal. 70% close within, but leave," I said, not looking up from my knife work. "You're trespassing. I'm your mother. You're an unauthorized person in my place of business. Leave, or I call the police." She left, but not before saying, "You'll regret this. When you're bankrupt and begging, remember, you chose this." That night, I had Naomi draw up the paperwork. Trespass notices for Elaine and Richard Carlisle, filed with Charleston PD, copies posted at every entrance. If they stepped foot in Ember and Grace after opening, it would be a criminal act. Lisa found me at sitting in the dining room, staring at the trespass notice. "Second thoughts?" she asked. "No," I said, signing my name one more time. Just first freedoms. The grand opening menu read like a love letter to every dish they'd mocked, every technique they'd stolen, every dream they'd tried to suffocate. December 1st, 7 p.m., 48 guests who'd earned their seats through the membership process, applications reviewed, references checked, agreements signed. I stood in my kitchen at 4 p.m., watching my team transform raw potential into edible poetry. The Sunday peach roast, the dish Elaine had called amateur garbage, now elevated with heritage pork from a farm my parents had deemed too small. Peaches flambéed with bourbon that cost more per bottle than they'd ever paid me for a week's work. "Behind," Marcus called, carrying the grits, not just grits, but an alchemy of corn from 3 different mills. Cream reduced with roasted bones, topped with crispy shallots so thin they looked like gold leaf. The grits of glory. Because if you're going to be mocked for Southern cooking, you might as well make it biblical. The low country tide came next: oysters, clams, mussels, and shrimp. I'd driven 3 hours to source myself, each piece singing in a broth that took 18 hours to build. One sip could make you understand the Atlantic. My parents had once served a version of this at a wedding, credited to Carlisle family tradition. Tonight, the menu would read, "Created by Chef Ava Carlisle, inspired by the grandmother who actually taught her to read the tides." Lisa worked the dessert station, assembling the forged-in-fire tart's lemon curd so bright it could make you weep, activated charcoal crust that turned your tongue black before the citrus washed it clean. A dessert that left marks, then erased them. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but revenge rarely is. At 6:15 p.m., the team gathered for family meal, a tradition I'd insisted on. We ate standing up, tasting each element one more time, adjusting salt by grains, acid by drops. My servers wore custom aprons with a simple message embroidered at the bottom: "We feed, we don't belittle." "They're here," my hostess, Angela, said. At 6:45 p.m., the early arrivals. Through the kitchen window, I watched Charleston's influence makers enter my space. Food critics trying to look anonymous, city council members who'd known me since birth, 3 James Beard winners who'd driven in from Atlanta, and Judge Morrison with his wife, the same couple who'd laughed at my parents' risotto story. The dining room glowed with intention. Edison bulbs strung like rosaries, casting shadows that made everyone look like conspirators. The exposed brick held heat from the ovens, making the space feel alive, breathing. Every table setting precise but not precious, this was elevated comfort, not intimidation. Dining. Marcus and I worked the pass like we'd been partners for years, not days. Every plate got inspected twice, adjusted with tweezers, wiped clean enough to reflect the lights. This wasn't just dinner, it was testimony. "First course out," I called at 7:22 p.m. Amuse-bouche, a single spoonful of butterbean soup with ham dust, served in hand-thrown ceramic spoons made by a local artist my parents had called too rustic. One bite to reset expectations, to say this meal would honor the South without apology. The courses flowed like a confession, each dish more personal than the last. The salad course used lettuce from my secret garden, the one I'd tended at 2 a.m. when insomnia and ambition wouldn't let me sleep. The fish course flounder so fresh it had been swimming 8 hours ago, sauced with a reduction that took 3 days and 6 attempts to perfect. Between the 5th and 6th courses, Judge Morrison's wife stood up. My heart stopped. Was something wrong? She began to clap. 1 person, then 2, then the entire dining room on their feet, applauding before the meal was even finished. Through the service window, I saw tears on faces, hands pressed to hearts, the universal gesture of being moved. "Chef," Angela appeared at the pass, trying to maintain professional composure. "Table 7 wants to send their compliments. Says they've been eating at Carlisle events for 20 years, and nothing ever tasted like this." I didn't celebrate, just nodded, called the next course. But inside, something that had been clenched for 2 decades finally relaxed. At 9:30 p.m., I emerged from the kitchen to visit tables tradition demanded it. Moving through the dining room, I accepted compliments like communion wafers, each one healing something I hadn't known was broken. The Charlotte food critic stopped me. "That peach roast, I need to know." "It's the dish my mother called amateur garbage," I said simply. I just removed the garbage, and the mother. The laughter that followed felt like absolution. At table 12, Rowan Pierce raised her glass. "To Ember and Grace. May your reservations always be impossible and your critics always be silenced by their first bite." The toast rippled through the room. 48 glasses raised to something that shouldn't exist, a restaurant built from the ashes of family betrayal, seasoned with tears, plated with precision. "Speech," someone called. I stood at the center of my dining room, sous chef whites stained with the evidence of real work, and spoke. "Every dish tonight was once called a mistake by someone who should have called it extraordinary. This restaurant exists because I learned the difference between being fed and being nourished, between family and those who feast on your dreams. To those who mock the hands that feed them, may you always hunger. To those who honor the cook and the cooking, welcome to Ember and Grace." The applause that followed could have raised the dead or buried them depending on which side of the kitchen door you stood. At 11 p.m., after the last guest had left, my team gathered in the kitchen. Marcus pulled out a bottle of champagne he'd hidden in the freezer. To the chef who opened a restaurant, he said, and closed a chapter. We drank from coffee cups and measuring cups and anything that could hold liquid, too exhausted for proper glassware. The dishwasher hummed its mechanical prayer. The ovens ticked as they cooled. And somewhere in Charleston, two people who'd given me life but tried to steal my dreams were learning what it meant to be hungry for something you'd never taste. They arrived at 8:45 p.m., 2 weeks after the grand opening, dressed like they were attending their own coronation. Elaine in Saint Laurent, Richard in Armani, trailing a small group of their country club elite, the Weatherbys, the Blackwells, Judge Morrison without his wife this time. They moved through the December night like they owned it, every step calculated to project success despite the rumors of Carlisle Events hemorrhaging clients. I watched from the kitchen through our security monitor as they approached the host stand. Angela stood ready, the trespass notice tucked discreetly beneath her reservation iPad. "Carlisle, party of 6, Elaine announced, voice carrying that particular tone of people who've never been denied anything. "I called earlier." "I'm sorry," Angela said, professional steel in every word. "We show no reservation under that name." "Check again," Richard's voice now, the one he used with vendors who dared question invoices. "We're here to celebrate our daughter's little restaurant. Surely you have room for her family." That word family landed like hot oil on skin. Angela didn't flinch. "Mr. and Mrs. Carlisle, I'm required to inform you that you've been issued a trespass notice for this establishment. The owner has explicitly refused service. I need to ask you to leave the premises immediately." The silence that followed was exquisite. Through the monitor, I watched Elaine's face cycle through confusion, indignation, and finally, rage. Several diners near the entrance had stopped eating, forks suspended midair, witnessing the kind of scene that would become Charleston legend by morning. "Get Ava," Elaine demanded. "Get her right now." I set down my knife, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked to the dining room. Not rushed, not angry, just walking toward the inevitable conclusion we'd all been cooking since that night at the Halcyon Club. The dining room seemed to hold its breath as I emerged. My regulars recognized the moment for what it was: dinner and a show. The kind of drama you couldn't buy. "Ava," Richard tried for fatherly authority. "This nonsense has gone far enough. We're here to support you, to celebrate your trespassing," I said, voice clear enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "As the owner of Ember and Grace, I'm refusing you service and asking you to leave. Security has been notified." "You ungrateful," Elaine started, but Judge Morrison touched her arm, whispered something about witnesses, about scenes, about the cameras everyone pretended not to notice but were definitely recording. The Weatherbys shifted uncomfortably. The Blackwells found their shoes fascinating. These people who'd laughed at my parents' jokes about their incompetent daughter were now watching those same parents being escorted out by a former Marine I'd hired specifically for this moment. "This is illegal," Richard said, even as they were guided toward the door. "You can't discriminate. I can refuse service to anyone who threatens my business or my well-being," I replied, quoting the statute Naomi had made me memorize. "Your trespass notice was filed with Charleston PD 2 weeks ago. If you return, you'll be arrested." Elaine turned at the door, her composure finally cracking like badly tempered chocolate. "You think you've won. You think this little revenge fantasy makes you special. You're nothing without us." Nothing. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd given me life but not love, opportunity but not credit, a kitchen but not a name. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just the clean emptiness of a plate waiting for the next course. "The difference between us," I said, "is that I know exactly who I am without you. You're about to learn who you are without me." They left then, Elaine's heels clicking against pavement like a countdown clock. Through the window, I watched them cluster on the sidewalk, Elaine gesticulating wildly while Richard tried to preserve some dignity. The Weatherbys and Blackwells made excuses and scattered. Judge Morrison walked away without a backward glance. My parents stood alone under the streetlight, two people who'd built an empire on their daughter's talent and couldn't understand why the foundation had collapsed the moment she removed herself from beneath it. I returned to my kitchen, to the controlled chaos of service, to the symphony of sizzles and calls and careful plating. Marcus looked at me, raised an eyebrow. "It's done," I said, and picked up my knife. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of perfect plates. Every dish that left the pass was a small revolution, a tiny fuck you seasoned with fleur de sel and served at exactly the right temperature. My team moved like dancers who'd found their rhythm, and the kitchen sang with the kind of joy that comes from doing something extraordinarily well. At 11 p.m., after the last dessert had been served, the final wine glass polished, I stood in my empty dining room. The ghosts were gone, not just my parents, but the girl who'd cooked for free, who'd believed family meant something more than shared DNA, who'd thought love could be earned through perfect risotto. Angela approached with the evening's numbers. "Fully booked through March," she said. "The waiting list is at 800. And chef." She smiled. "Someone from the James Beard Foundation called. You're on the semi-finalist list." I nodded, too full of everything and nothing to speak. Later, alone in my office, I pulled out the leather journal that had documented years of theft. On a fresh page, I wrote December 15th. Elaine and Richard Carlisle attempted entry, were refused, the door held. Then I closed the journal, locked it in the safe with all the other evidence I'd never need to use, and prepared tomorrow's prep list. Because revenge, I'd learned, wasn't a dish best served cold. It was best served at exactly the temperature you intended, to exactly the people who deserved it, in a space where respect wasn't optional and family was chosen by behavior, not blood. Ember and Grace thrived. Carlisle events folded within a year. And I never looked back through that door I'd closed, not even once. The trespass notice still hangs in my office, framed like a diploma. Sometimes, when young cooks tell me about their struggles, about family who doesn't understand, about dreams deferred for others' comfort, I point to it. Sometimes, I tell them, the most important recipe you'll ever perfect is the one for walking away. Thank you so much for listening to this story of revenge, redemption, and really excellent food. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect across continents and kitchens. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal dreams? What would you have done in Ava's shoes? Your stories inspire mine. So please, keep them coming.